Well, let's talk about your current work. One thing you're currently doing medical education, and medical education is, I mean, in that surgeons are essentially performers to some extent without music. Is this the kind of thing you're talking about?
Yeah, I have done some stuff around surgical training and again, just motor control type research. In general, um, the interacting with a physician requires having a certain amount of compassion and empathy and being present that in a lot of ways resembles theater and resembles, I don't
Ah,
want to say a stage performance because it's not artificial, but it definitely takes practice, and you have to develop a certain persona that is your doctor persona.
well, I
um,
wouldn't say the theater is artificial.
right.
It
Uh,
is. It exists in a world, but in that world, it's real. You're anybody that's pretending an emotion on stage. I mean, it's not that you're pretending the emotion. You're just pretending you're having a real emotion with pretend people.
yeah, exactly, I hear that.
Yeah.
um, and then so when it's real people and they're talking about a real thing, that's what all I mean is I want to make sure that, we're not training doctors to be phony, but we are training them to be aware of how they're coming across. Um,
Well, let me read this statement that you posted about your current work. Quote, we demonstrated that when medical students start having clinical experiences, they begin to understand that empathy is or is not something that takes conscious effort. Some do and some don't. This is important for clinical teachers to understand. I do need some clarification on what you meant by that.
yeah, so there's a, I don't know how much detail we want to go
Go,
into in
go,
it.
go.
All right. Well, we've got there's a concern that medical students come into medical school with a lot of like empathy, that they're like, most people when they want to be a doctor, they're like, I want to help people, and I want to be a um, I really want to, people are sick, they're hurt, they're in pain, I want to be there, I want to be the helper. And when you measure that with psychological instruments, you see that over the course of medical training, that urge drops.
Mm.
uh, and there's a lot of concern in the profession that we're sucking the joy of medicine and the humanity of medicine out of them with medical training. But there's a paper that I wrote many years ago now. We did an analysis of the main tool that is used to measure that patient empathy, or sorry, physician empathy score. And the two items that are responsible for that decline are basically ones about how hard it is to be empathetic. And it's not that that medical students are decreasing in empathy. What they're doing is they're learning that it's hard. And so the way the instrument's scored is if you say like, you know, you have to put yourself in the patient's shoes to understand their perspective. If you agree with that statement, you get a lower empathy score, because what you're kind of saying is like, it doesn't come to me naturally. It's something I like
Had
have
to
to
think
do
about.
intentionally, right? Put some
Mhm.
effort into it. Um, and so I'm
Is
trying to
that
remember what the
accurate?
other item is.
Yeah. I mean, is it accurate to say that I mean, that sounds to me backwards.
I agree. I
Yeah.
agree, because I don't think it's commonly understood that empathy and communication are skills. Um, and much like stage performance is a skill. It's something you practice. You're not necessarily good at it until you've done it a bunch of times, and every time you do it, you learn something new about it. And if you get up and bomb, that doesn't mean you will never be a good performer. It just means you know
Yeah.
you're
So it
not
seems
you're
that
not good at it yet.
your experience as a performer gives you actually, I mean, even more. So you lost out at being a music psychologist, but instead you've brought some perhaps perspective to people that need it the most.
That's well, who need it for sure. And
Yeah.
that's my role as a medical educator, is I try to bring some of that social science and some of that performance and some of that humanities work from a social science perspective into the field of medical education. And as because education is also to a large degree performance as well. So
But it strikes me as having two values. I mean, of course, one is the practical value that you're actually providing these doctors with a chance to think about empathy and in a way that is for some doctors who are very, I need to see research. I need to see. I don't believe in froofy. You're saying, well, here's the research that
that's
backs
right.
up. empathy. But you're also legitimizing parts of life that such people sometimes discount, which is really nice. In a sense, you're expressing that what that musician is doing up on stage is related to what you're doing, and you're allowing people not only to empathize with their patients, but to empathize with people like me.
Yeah, exactly. And you know what's funny is there is I keep thinking I have to do something with this because I know it's true, but I have to like demonstrate it.
Yeah.
That musicianship seems to be much higher among the physician population than in the general population.
Oh yeah, yeah.
There's a lot, and I don't know if it's about like discipline and practice or something about the ability to attend to things for a long time or like the joy of doing something technical that's also art, you know,
Well, could it be a contrast thing? I mean, it's a place
or
where
maybe.
you can use some of the skills you've developed as a doctor if you have that sense of performance. Like you're going to be all right, Mrs. Jones, but you can use it in a place that's not like
Here's a little song I wrote.
you're not gonna die. Ready, go. Um, I mean, it's like I can see it as like a release for them. It's like I get a chance to use my skills, but I don't have to be that guy anymore. I can, I can play music, and it's like again, music is to some extent. Here's a quote about Bruce Springsteen that I think you'll like. Terry Gross asked him, she said something to the effect of, "There's a lot of people who would really like to be that guy up on stage," and Bruce said, "Well, there was times when I wanted to be that guy." And I'm like, what? Oh my God, it's an act? Like Bruce Springsteen, of course, he's very, he's very sincere and you believe him, but to some extent, that guy on stage is not him. It's a
Right.
persona that he's created to channel a lot of stuff and to make the band work and for people to love what he's doing. And doctors can tap into that. It's just like the acting thing where you're having real emotions in an imaginary scenario. The song world is not a real world. But you can express powerful emotions there, and they can be perceived as real by the audience.
Yeah,
Doctors
isn't that,
must like that.
yeah, I think they do, and they must resonate with that. And it's interesting too, like the whole idea of professionalism is exactly this, right? You put on a persona, but and everybody knows it's not real. Like,
Right.
um, but
It has
it,
rules. It
it
has
has
rules.
rules, and there's expected behavior, and if you deviate from that behavior, and it's fascinating watching, having on the downside, hopefully, of the global pandemic we've all been through. We do this all the time now with these Zoom calls. So much of my work is done through this stuff, and medicine is now done increasingly on these telehealth calls. And there's a different set of rules about that, and
Mhm.
how does communication work when you're not face to face, and um, the
Yeah.
camera mutes a lot of emotional expression, so you got to really turn it up to be seen. And
Ah,
people who do television work know that. People who do film work know that. But again, who among us has practiced that?
right. And so you're able to provide, again, concrete research-based information about that.
Yeah, we actually are doing right now. We're doing simulated patient exercises through video versus in person with actors pretending to be patients, and we're comparing the communication styles and what works and what doesn't work so that we can actually do that, disseminate some evidence base about here's different, here's how you should approach communication
Mhm.
in a telehealth visit that's different.
That's great. I mean, yeah, I'm very happy to hear you're doing that.
Yeah,
It's needed.
in a lot of ways though, that's far afield of, it's relevant to music. It's not completely divorced from it, but I am rediscovering as a middle-aged man the joy of bringing actual music, qua music, back into my life. And I have the freedom to do that now that my children are grown, and um, I can manage to get away from family obligations, and spend the time that it takes to knuckle down on something esoteric and useless that doesn't bring any money into the house.
Well, wow, listen to all those judgments. We've just been talking about how useful all of this is.
I understand, but I did really sort of put it in a box when I was in college, later in college, and just saying like,
Mhm.
you know what, I think this is not my calling professionally.
Hmm.
And I think maybe that was an error on my part. And if I had to do things differently, I would have been more freely incorporating performance into my
Mm.
work life.
But of course, it's not too late, not at all.
No, it is
And
not, as I
and
am learning.
we will be talking more about that. But I have some other pressing questions I want to ask you before we do, just because I want to save SF for last. Um, just because you've had the experience, because you've done so much research, I want to pick your brain just generally for the teachers in the audience. I want you to please talk about two things. First, best practices for learning and retention, if you can, in a
Okay.
nutshell. And
Okay.
second, best practices for teaching. If you can just, like I said, just because you've been swimming in this for so long, what comes off the top of your head?
All right. Learning and retention. This is very well documented. You have to do deliberate practice. So, the work that everyone knows, Malcolm Gladwell's Blink and the 10,000 hours rule, that is cribbed from the work of a guy named Erickson,
Milton
um,
Erickson?
Anders Erickson.
Oh, Andrews Erickson.
Um, and the 10,000 hours, which is a pretty good estimate of what it takes for expertise, has to be spent doing what they call deliberate practice, which is you're focused on what you're doing. You do it in a safe space where you can make mistakes and it doesn't matter. You think about those mistakes and why you made those mistakes. You have a reflective period when you're done doing your practicing, and then you go to sleep. So you have to do it in chunks, and it's these three phases: practice, self-reflect, sleep. Or if not sleep, do something else
Rest.
and rest. But you have to let your brain do the work without you thinking about it. You have to go think about other stuff because your brain will do the rest of the work without you knowing it. And if you try to interfere with what your brain wants to do, you'll just muck it up. It's kind of like letting the sediment settle to the bottom. Like the more you get in there and try to push the sediment down,
Neat.
you're just ruining it. So you just have to just let it alone. Your brain knows what it's doing, and so it'll settle. And then you come back, and then you work again. And anybody who's worked on them, I think everybody, it's a universal experience, right? You work on a problem and you're like, why can't I get this? You put it away, you go to sleep, you wake up the next day, you go look at it again, you're like, oh, well, why was I, what was,
Right.
the answer's right there.
Yeah.
And that's because your brain solved the problem without you knowing it. It's not that you were dumb, it's that you got smarter.
Yeah.
And so that's learning and retention right there. So that cycle, building that into your own routine, is important. And again, coming back to medical school, it's hard to tell medical students and residents to sleep. They just don't believe you. They just don't believe you that if you're not actively working on something, you're being productive. Like that message, it's hard, I think, for most people to understand.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, it seems like a waste of time.
it looks like a waste of time, doesn't it?
Right, right. I mean, no pain, no gain. But it's not true in physical activity either, of course. In
No,
physical
you have
activity,
to
you break
rest.
down and you rest and you
Right.
rebuild.
And muscles, which are just like brain, like muscle fibers fire exactly the same way neurons do.
Oh, wow.
They grow, you develop muscle on the rest cycle.
Mhm.
You tax them, add some protein, go rest. And that's when your muscles grow. And it's the same exact thing with your brain. Like you work it to the point of exhaustion, feed it, go to sleep.
Yeah.
So that's learning and retention. And I think in a nutshell, and that's the thing that I think gets missed a lot, is the importance of self-reflection and the importance of rest.
Hmm.
And so the little wisdom about education is really kind of recognizing that. An educator once told me, and I think about it probably every day, whoever's doing the work is doing the learning. So if you're a teacher and you're like preparing the lecture and you're giving the lecture and you're going through the slides and you're demonstrating the thing and you're walking them through the problem, like you're the one doing the learning.
Yeah. Well,
And
certainly
they're
I
not
learned.
them.
Yes, I learned a lot. I got a lot better as a pianist once I started teaching. It was pretty remarkable.
Isn't that funny?
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's a nice trick too, is getting your learners to teach each other
Hmm.
a thing, because it makes the teacher is the one who has to figure it out
Mm.
and put together the little lesson plan and or whatever the exercise is and
Yeah.
pay attention to somebody else doing it and say, no, you're doing it wrong. They're doing the work. So they're doing the learning.
Wow, that's fascinating. I think I'm gonna try that on my studio. I really like
Yeah.
that idea.
Yeah, it's a nice trick. And you feel like you're cheating. You feel like you're getting away with murder.
You get paid, but they teach each other.
They're doing the work, and it's my job.
And I'm sleeping.
And I get to go to bed. I wake up smarter.
I solved that problem. Okay, well, what about best practices for teaching? We touched on it just a second ago, but again, best practices for teaching.
Yeah, let's see. I have learned a great deal about discussion. The superpower in a discussion as a discussion leader is to just let everybody else get uncomfortable with silence. So
Wow.
one of my favorite things to do is to ask the open-ended question at the beginning of the discussion and then just not say anything. Like, I don't care. You want to sit here for an hour and not say anything? It's fine with me. I will just say, how do we remediate an unprofessional resident? And then eventually somebody will say something. But
yeah.
But once hearts are broken and people start talking.
Well, why then? Why do that? I mean, you could be more compassionate and scaffold them. Why force them to go through this?
Oh, because you don't learn unless you take the initiative. You don't learn unless you do. And the more you put the guardrails up and show them exactly what to do, the fewer decisions they have to make in their own head. And the more they're just, they go through the motions. And that's good too, especially for a complete novice. But in terms of, a discussion about experiences and sharing, especially when you're dealing with adults, it's better to sort of let them own the problem. I mean, that's all. I'm a big believer in sort of the adult learning theory models of, it's all about identity. It's all about motivation, internal motivation. Like, you have to want to be there. You have to be willing to do the work, and you have to know why you're doing it. It's different with kids. There's a difference between pedagogy and andragogy. It is true, definitely kids respond to authority, especially grown-ups' authority, very differently than adults do. And so I only work with adults, and so my wisdoms are very require the learners to bring a lot of their authentic selves. But children are the other way around, because it's been a long time since I taught a kid anything.
Yeah.
Even my own kids they don't listen to me anyway, but even when they were young, like, they just look to you for the signals, the yes or no signals. And it's easy in a lot of ways to just kind of give in and just say, like, that was good, that was bad. And some of that's important. But also there's giving the kids freedom to decide what's good and what's bad is important.
Yeah.
But developmental milestones, like, I do remember that, like I said before, with Dr. Palmer's work on kids learning piano, it is funny to listen. There is an age where they will play, Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, and they'll get a note wrong, stop, back up a measure, and then try again.
Yeah.
And that you've seen that behavior,
of course,
all the time. But then there's an age where they learn, like, I'm just going to keep going. Like, it actually makes more sense to not stop.
Exactly.
You make more, like, stopping is more of an error than the whatever note you missed. And then at some point they learn that there are smart errors and dumb errors, right? There's errors you can make that nobody would even notice because the tone was in the chord, or you can even, like, backfill an error and make it sound like a little trill, or
oh, absolutely,
like a little ornament.
Any mistake repeated several times is music.
It becomes a song, right?
Absolutely.
That's right.
It no longer sounds stupid if you repeat it.
That's right.
It no longer sounds stupid if you repeat it.
You keep telling yourself
it
that,
no
buddy.
longer sounds stupid if you repeat it.
You know what? You've got a point.
Yeah. No. Well, okay. So I want to have. I don't just want to interview. I want to discuss this with you, because I have taught adults and children, taught groups of adults, taught groups of children, taught individuals. And you can tell me if my experience is actually the same as what you're describing, or if I'm describing something that differs from your opinion. My experience of adults is that they are actually the same as children with tons more filter. That if I teach my adults the way I teach children, but without condescending, I don't condescend to them, but I use the same methodology for my piano adults that I use for the kids, and they just learn it a heck of a lot faster.
Yeah.
I just talk to them like they're competent, and I explain to them. But when I need to make it simple, I do. And my kids, I don't talk down to my kids, but I don't treat them like little adults. But I do, to the extent that they're capable, tell them stuff like this, like, there's a difference between a finger slip and not knowing what you're doing. And even if they're like 6, I had a 6-year-old or a 7-year-old, I talked to him about this very thing. He said, "What's a finger slip?" And I told him, and so I'm sure there's an age at which it's easier for them to understand this, but I find it's essential from the get-go to talk about things like how important the steady beat is, and how it's really the steady beat that makes the music, not any of the stuff you're playing. And that if you stop, like I told one of my students, silence is the nuclear bomb of music. That if you can use it, like she was a songwriter, right?
Yep.
And she was like using silence. And I said, look, you can use silence in your songwriting, but you better be careful, because it scares the hell out of people. And it's a great tool if you really want to, if you want to knock the audience completely on their butts. Yeah, put some silence in there. The longer you get it, the more you're going to get. People will get angry, people will get sad, and you don't have to do a thing. You just sit there with your guitar, and they'll start to have all sorts of emotions because you're not telling them how to feel anymore.
That's right, man. The silence drives people nuts.
So, and your description of what you do with silence is essentially a justification for a piece which is reviled, but which I love. John Cage, 433.
433.
It is not a joke piece.
No.
It has often been used as a joke piece, and that misses the point entirely. It's exactly what you're talking about. It by removing any semblance of the ordinary music experience, the audience is responsible for their own music experience.
Well, and also the performance remains, right? So that piece is in 3 movements. That's one of the things that doesn't get talked about a lot. Is it is up to the performer needs to tell the audience when the piece has begun, when the first movement is over, which can last however long, and the second movement begins when that's over, when the third movement begins, and then when the whole piece is over, and then they can clap, and the whole thing has to last 43, and that's it. Right. But it's no small feat. Mm-mm. To tell an audience member, okay, now, right? Okay, and now we rest, but nobody claps yet because it's between movements. Yeah. And again, right? And that's a skill. All those physical cues.
I didn't know it really had 3 movements. I thought that was just something people did. I didn't realize that was part of the piece.
It's in the score.
Wow.
It's
that
funny.
Would make it even more difficult. Wow. I've always wanted to perform this piece, but now that I know it has 3 movements, I'm afraid, actually.
Yeah, you got to practice.
Yeah, right.
Oh no, I messed up.
Right.
I did 4 minutes 34.
It's a finger slip.
It was a finger slip.
Okay.
But yeah, I'm curious though, because like when you teach adults, do you move through a text? Or do you give them options? Like, what do you want to learn next? Do you give them, do they come in with something like, I just want to learn how to play bluegrass? Or
okay, so there's 2 different areas. There's one is the one-on-one, and then there's the group. Right. I like to do public speaking, and when I'm public speaking, I'm essentially educating. And I've also done, I don't know if you know what the Feldenkrais method is, but I'm a Feldenkrais practitioner, and I do group. We'll talk about this at length some other time, but it's essentially a group class. It's a learning experience through movement. It's a movement-based learning approach in which everybody is going through certain movements to change their experience in their nervous system and rewire their brain for action.
Oh, this sounds interesting.
It's very interesting. So in that case, in the case of an ATM, there's a text. ATM, Awareness Through Movement lesson. I have a lesson that's been designed either by me or someone else. And the sequence of the lessons is designed very carefully to provide constraints to habitual action, so that if you are, for instance, if the lesson is about rotation, and you always rotate, okay, let's keep our head still. You're going to rotate without moving your head, right? And now you're going to move your head in the opposite direction.
Got it.
Okay, and now you're going to go back to the way you used to do it. And has anything changed? And this is all done very slowly over the course of, so these lessons, Moshe Feldenkrais designed thousands of these types of lessons. And he was exquisite. He was a judo black belt, and he knew exactly how the human body works. He was also a physicist and knew a
Yeah.
lot about anatomy. And so I adhere very carefully to these texts.
Oh, that's fabulous.
Yes, while of course asking people, a lot of these lessons are very difficult. And like, there's some people like myself who cannot touch their toes when they're sitting on their butt on the ground with their legs out. But some lessons ask you to do this. So, okay, you can't do this. You're not allowed to take yourself into pain. Can you think about the movement?
Right.
Where is it? So there has to be room for people to experience the discomfort of not being able to satisfy the requirement so that they can get into the process and improve. The improvement has got to be more important than the goal of touching your toes.
Right.
So that's the group aspect. One-on-one, I expose it to the same. For me as a piano teacher, I have a specific set of things I want them to learn. If they want to go off in their own direction, I will follow them. But in the absence of that, no, I have a program, a sequence. I guess it's a Feldenkrais-inspired piano lesson. It's
Nice.
a sequence that I teach. It's part scales, part reading, and part improvisation. And I've developed it carefully. And the idea is that they can go into this program and there's no hurry and there's no rush. And it's all about, let's find out where you're having trouble and let's, see what we can do to ameliorate that. And this program is designed to make sure, you keep moving forward at all times. It's so like, here's a module. And if this module ends up having to expand to take 6 months, that's okay. We can break it down more and more. But if it only takes you a week, that's great. We can move on to something else. So that's adults. What was your question originally?
Well, I was kind of asking if you give the adults more freedom to own their own education. But it sounds like you have a sort of a guided curriculum that's based on an underlying theoretical structure that is tried and true and works for all ages.
But of course, with children and adults, if something isn't working, as I've matured as a piano teacher, I have started to deviate from my plan when it's necessary and try things that I like. We talked about constraints. So I keep some constraints in place because they're important. No, I really want you to count while you're playing because the counting activates your eyes and makes sure you're locked in. But if counting isn't working for someone, well, I have to let that go for a little while. Okay, so let the counting go. I have to. So in that way, I let them. If they're kids, they don't have any idea,
Right, but you're responding to their
cues,
their educational needs.
The goal is to always make sure they are moving and can sense their own improvement.
Right.
And so I will do whatever it takes for that to happen. Can I break it down enough so that you can begin to see the steps? Of course, there's an atomic level at which you can't break it down anymore. It's so you have to. That's a tricky spot. But other than that, yeah.
Right. Do you teach theory along with performance?
So yes, but I only teach the theory that they need to solve whatever problem. And that's also a technique thing. So I do not teach my students to read EGBDF at all for the first year and a half, most of them.
Okay.
We focus on reading and we use numbers because when you start playing the piano, the hands never move. So there's no reason to teach. Reading music is maniacally difficult. It's a terrible representation of music. It's really movement instruction and it's codified. So you have to learn the code that tells you how you move. And the easiest thing to do is just play the numbers you see. Once they've learned, once they've learned how to move to music, it's a simple matter to teach them music theory. So I teach that stuff later after they've incorporated the bodily aspect of playing the piano.
Yeah. My grandfather loved piano and he would play. He was completely self-taught.
Yeah.
And he would just play. It was the kind of guy, like, if we went out to, I used to go to a restaurant called the Ground Round, which was just this like burger place, but they would always have old timey movies playing about a big screen. And my grandfather would immediately go to the piano and just start doing like chase music for the cartoon characters.
Oh, wow.
And just, he always told the same joke and then everybody would clap and he'd say like, one night only.
That's great.
But I remember asking him at some point, like, do you like, what do you how do you understand music? I can't remember how I put it, but I was trying to get at the question, like, does he understand anything about music theory? never took a lesson in his life. I don't think he read about it. He could just play.
Yeah.
And he said, "Oh, it's all triangles." And then he sat down at the keyboard and he just started playing and he's like, "See, it's triangles." And that's all I got out of him. I don't know what he meant.
Wow. That's a
I can
koan.
guess. I mean, I think he was talking about triads or.
Well, I mean, I
But
was
isn't
just
that
thinking
funny?
the body makes a triangle when it plays.
It's I don't know what he was saying exactly, but
All triangles.
it's all triangles, man. It's
And
triangles.
I'll tell you something interesting that I know about Mozart, which is that he worked lots more in his composition using threes. His music is grouped in threes much more than other composers.
Huh.
Like this Bernstein talked about this in one of his lectures about, how he nested things and stuff. And I've noticed that Mozart definitely more than Beethoven, more than Schubert, it's not even pairs. It's like 1, 2, 3, and in that 3 there's another 1, 2, 3 that leads to another 1, 2, 3. So it's all
I see what you're
triangles.
saying. I see
All
what you're saying.
triangles.
It's all triangles,
I
man.
wonder if your grandfather maybe picked up on that.
Maybe.
It's a fascinating way to describe music. All triangles.
Isn't it funny? And yeah, it sticks with me because I wonder exactly what he meant. It's too late now. He's no longer with us,
Well,
sadly.
of course, it could be the triads too. 3 notes in a chord.
But
Triangles.
the joy of it was knowing that he had constructed some sort of model in his head.
Yeah,
about
right.
What was
He
going
had.
on.
Yes, yes.
And there's an understanding that.
I think a lot of musicians who are undereducated, if you'll pardon the expression, like somebody even like Paul McCartney, who
Yep.
he's embarrassed that he can't read music, but he's constructed his own music theory system, and he's composed immensely wonderful music through that.
Clearly.
The only drawback is if you don't have music theory, it's hard to talk to people about it. So you end up saying it's all triangles and no one knows what you mean.
Right. Exactly.
That's what music theory is good for, talking about it.
That's right.
Or supposed to be. I don't know.
And yeah, and this kind of like sense of explanation for why some things are compelling or why some patterns keep recurring. I always loved theory, but not that I was very good at it or had in particular like affinity for it.
Right. Hard
it-
to do well. I mean,
Yeah.
it's easy to do music theory very badly because,
Yeah.
you just, well, here are the rules. The
If
rules.
you know a little bit, you can make all sorts of dumb mistakes.
Yeah. That's why Bernstein's lectures are so wonderful.
That's what I loved about the Bernstein lectures is that he connected that stuff to psychology in a very straightforward way. I didn't know what I was listening to at the time. I didn't know how valuable that was. All I knew was that it was bizarrely compelling.
Yeah. Well, okay. So, did we finish best practices for teaching, or did I answer all of your questions?
I think you did all the work, so you did all the learning.
Thank you for interviewing me tonight. No, I have more.